And when you reflect on it, when you look back on it, like you and I are really kind of doing today, then a lot of activities happen, a lot of wealth's been generated, a lot of things have been created in that time period. But we had to take the action to create a business and invest in a very modest single family home in the beginning.
Welcome to Flying Upstream, the podcast where we uncover the choices, practices, and wisdom that defy mainstream conventions. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Louisa. And together we're here to illuminate the alternative paths that have shaped human experiences through the ages. In each episode, we'll examine ways to move beyond societal norms. We're passionate about how timeless wisdom and unique lifestyle choices can foster healthier, sustainable, and enriching lives.
Join us as we navigate, challenge, and celebrate the beauty and insight of walking the road less traveled. If you've ever felt like you're flying north for the winter while everyone else is flying south, you've found your flock.
Beautiful listeners, welcome to another episode of the Flying Upstream podcast, the podcast where we explore the depths of human potential and the power of unconventional thinking. Today, we're exploring the world of magic, essentially. We're exploring the world of walking your own path. We're digging deep into what it looks like when you allow your inspiration and when you allow your desires to drive the way. We have a beautiful guest on with us today. Her name is Sharon Riddle. Sharon has worked in companies, nonprofits, and government agencies. She has provided business solutions in the areas of software upgrades and business process analyses, and has conducted best business practice research for over 30 years. Sharon began investing in single family real estate in 2005 with her husband and business partner, Dan. She took a leadership role in managing all facets of the business, including property analysis, acquisition, rehab, property management, and resale of properties. Sharon, with her business partner Dan, started the transition to multifamily real estate in 2015 through initial education, investing, and now currently owns 18 properties in Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Florida, and Ohio, totaling 3,507 units to date. She also co-founded Excalibur Investments of Texas LLC with Dan in 2002. Sharon and Dan actively are involved in local, regional, and global charities. Sharon, welcome to the Flying Upstream podcast.
Thank you so much, Louisa, for having me today.
Of course, as our listeners know, we like to start at the beginning, Sharon. And I'd like to start talking a little bit about your journey, what your path has been like. And then we can dig right into where you're at today. But what got you here?
Okay. Well, it was kind of a windy path because way back when I was doing the thing where you go to school and that's kind of the straight and linear path, you're supposed to end up at a destination. Well, I ended up with my undergraduate degree. I thought I was going to be a counselor. Well, guess what? Grants were drying up in the early 80s under Reaganomics. And that's how I ended up really going into working in businesses because I had friends who were business women. And they're like, "Hi, you're a smart young woman. I think you can do this kind of work." And that's how I ended up working in more of a business environment. And that was only my first pivot, only the first one.
And I love sharing the fact that people's journeys are not one straight shot, because I think a lot of what happens is we are led to believe by societal norms and societal expectations that the way that we build our lives and that success and that everything to do with having what is on quote unquote a good life by societal standards is just like, if you don't get it right the first time, you're screwed. You're not going to be well off. You're not going to have a good life. So I'm really glad that you shared that. Let's talk a little bit about the thing that happened that made you pivot and say, okay, so I've been in business, I've done a lot of work for other businesses, that made you say, I think it's time to start building my own business?
Well, I will say it was Dan, and this is kind of a humorous story, but he came from a seminar. And my dad was a construction worker. So I was a construction brat. It has lent itself very well to real estate related tasks. But he came home from this conference and said, "Hey, I've got something that I think we could do." He was kind of toying between real estate and options trading or day trading because he was looking to have another stream of income and not just a W 2 job. Well, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So the leap for me has been a shorter leap because I had so many examples. I had my dad, I had two uncles, I even had a neighbor on my childhood neighborhood that was an entrepreneur. So all these people, and they all had really different ways of doing that. But the one that I really, really kind of focused in on because we had separate conversations about it was the one that had multiple streams of income, the only female entrepreneur. And if any of your listeners know the Robert Kiyosaki cash flow quadrant from Rich Dad Poor Dad, the investor quadrant is where she was. She wasn't in the self employed quadrant, which is where my dad and my two uncles were, where they were paying the most tax and they didn't have a second stream of income. But she definitely did. And she talked very openly about it to me as a girl. We would have our little business conversations, even when I was a middle schooler.
To what depth do you think that kind of opened your eyes to the possibilities?
Well, I think because she had more than one stream of income, it opened my ideas to the fact that you weren't just going to be in a place where you had seasonality of cash flow.
Mm.
My dad in construction, with my uncle in HVAC and plumbing, and with my uncle who had an automotive shop, they all had a seasonality of their income. So you had the feast or you had the famine. But my childhood neighbor, Mrs. Leona Shepherd McDaniel, did not have that because she evened out her streams of income. She had a real estate, she had a residual income from a grocer that her late husband had been a part of. She was a widow, and she had the only toy store in Denton, Texas in the early 1970s.
Wow, that's so important. I actually have not heard it said that way. And there's so much value in that because the simplicity with which you said it, I think, can kind of make it feel like, oh my God, this is possible, versus the way that we often hear it from like financial gurus and investment people and all the people that we see with diversified incomes. When you talk about seasonality, I think that really puts it into perspective. Like you mentioned, a mechanic has a season where it's like great. And then construction workers, it's the same. And then that feast and famine is so true and so real. So diversity is so important, but a lot of us can get overwhelmed into, what business do I invest in? What, when you start digging into anything, it can become overwhelming when even just the beginning of it is something that you have no knowledge of. How did you handle the hurdles of the things that you got into, because you've done a lot of different things and are doing a lot of different things? How did you handle those transitions when you lack the education and the knowledge of going into something new?
Well, actually, I had an MBA as far as the lexicon of business.
Mhm.
So I had that to operate from. So I knew what a business plan was. I had constructed a business plan as one of the team leads on a capstone project when I was working on my MBA. And I have used bits and pieces of all of that. And this is what I call your cross skill bucket. Because if you've been in W 2, if you've had any education or training, you can use those cross skills And you never know when you're going to have to pull those out of your hat. Because even working with my marketing team, we designed a website. Well, guess what? I was in a system and an analysis and design class when I was working on my MBA. And I could utilize the skill set and the education I received being in that class to design the website.
I love
Well,
that.
I'd also been a senior business analyst. I knew what best practices were. I utilized best practices to determine what was going to be on my website because honestly, I had friends who had some really great websites who were also multifamily investors, and I utilized many components of their websites. And they know that because I told them. I said, imitation is the highest form of flattery. There
Yes,
you
it is.
go. And so I've been able to pull those things out of my little hat. Plus, as far as cash flow and working with a business, my mom did the books for my dad's business. And
Mm.
I had an aunt who did the books for my uncle's business, and she taught my mom bookkeeping. So now I'm at a point where I actually have CPAs and I have a bookkeeper. In the beginning, I didn't have that. I sought out a CPA, but I had a friend who was a CPA, and I even asked her to refer me to a CPA. And that's how I found my first CPA. And I've been through three CPAs since 2005 when we created our first business. So you just never know where you're going to be able to utilize those cross skills. And a lot of people don't really think about that in terms of utilizing that in another business or in investing or in real estate investing. They don't think about that, but it really is a really critical thing.
I
And it also lessen a lot of fear because you've got some component of it. You've got a base to start from. So you're not always just starting out from scratch, from point zero, because you usually do have some foundation. You just don't think about the foundation you've already got that you can work and build on.
Such a great point that you make there because you are right. Whenever we do something new, there's some foundation. There is something that we've probably done, whether it's professionally, personally, whether we've heard our moms do it, seen our parents, family, friends. I feel like if we did take the time to think about it, we actually, like you said, are not starting from zero. We're not starting from nothing. There is at least one skill set that we carry that kind of allow us to get a basic understanding of what we're going into. And I appreciate the way that you put that as well, because I think that's important to acknowledge. As you were saying that, something that I did think is I often think about how technology, what role does technology play in all of our lives today, aside from obviously we're doing this podcast virtually, even plugging your resume into ChatGPT, for example, and asking ChatGPT what transferable skills into something else that you have. I think that may be helpful if one of our listeners is seeking or needing the confidence to be able to understand what skill set do I bring to this new venture that may be scary because everything new is usually scary. I think that's a great place to start so that hopefully it can become a little bit less overwhelming. But I want to pivot a little and focus a little bit more on your trajectory because we talked about how you're so multifaceted, and I love that. Absolutely love that, especially coming from a woman. We know that you have spanned from nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and private business, and you have your own business, and you transitioned. It sounds like you've had your own transitions in your own business as well. Can you take us back to the beginning and share how you transitioned each time? What brought you to the next step and what kept you going?
Well, in the single family business, when we had our portfolio, we could not grow that portfolio to our goal number. So what was happening, and we also had a credit crunch way back in 2008, 2009 time period. There was a real credit crunch going on. So what we did, I pulled out yet another thing out of my hat that I'd had on my radar screen, and I found a boot camp with Alan Cowgill so that I could work with private lenders. Instead of working with banks, who had all this credit crunch going on here and weren't loaning money to businesses and certainly not real estate investment businesses. I had people who were happy to make money and be on our single family portfolio projects. In fact, my father in law was my first private lender. I had a neighbor who was a private lender. I had two friends who were private lenders. And so we found out that it was really a good situation. It was really win-win for my investors, and it was also win-win for us so we could grow that portfolio more. Well, in 2015, we discovered another mentor, and we found our first multifamily mentor, Brad Sumrock. And we were like, wow, we've got these single family homes. We still need to grow them more. What if we had more doors on a building? What if we had an apartment? We were like thinking too small. Dan and I turned to each other and at his event, his boot camp, and we're like, wow, we're thinking too small. And so we could become passive investors doing that. And that's how we built up that portfolio over some years. Some years we would be investing more than others. But what we also discovered is we could have more tax advantage as well as more cash flow with our single family. Well, now we're pivoting again because the single family, we've had tax advantage, but we've also had some situations where we've had some pause distributions. But part of that is because, yes, again, we have a situation that is constraining credit, and that is in the form of those interest rate hikes. So many in such quick succession. So, what have we done? Well, I am in yet a second mastermind, and this is involved in just capital raising. Well, there are people who have all different real estate asset classes that they are working within. And guess what? Just Wednesday, we had a second meeting with a person who is in this mastermind with me. And he has a different asset class. And we're going to be able to fill some short term cash flow requirements and goals of ours because we're going to be an investor with him. And he has some Airbnb, but he also has some single family portfolio homes that he has put aside just for fire and water damage insurance claims. And he's got some companies he works with. So, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to be investors of his so he can get more of these houses up and running so he can put the insurance claim clients in the houses. And so that's what we're going to be doing. And we've also coupled that with some triple net way back in 2017. And the triple net, which just means it's long term leases, we have a fund we invested in that has some family dollars in it and some auto zones and those smaller stores that have like a 10-year lease on them, long term tenant lease. And we get distributions out of those. So we're just trying to think creatively. Okay, we've got a little bit of a gap on that cash flow side. What are we going to put in that? What are we going to put in that gap? We've still got these great advantages on the long-term exit with the multifamily, as well as the tax advantage. Let's couple that with one or two or maybe three other things. And just like we were looking at and I was talking to you about the seasonality of cash flow with my dad and my two uncles in their businesses, we were having a little seasonality there too because of those interest rate hikes. So we were coming up with some different solutions so we have that cash flow stabilized.
And I want to point out a couple of points that you made. One is education. It sounds like you and your husband and business partner have been proactive in seeking out education and seeking out knowledge of what you can do. And it seems like both, at least two of the times where you have expanded and grown your business, have been a result of seeking in these masterminds. seeking knowledge and education. So I just want to point that out because I think that can get lost when we grow up in a system that tells us do this, do this, do that. For a lot of people, when they leave college and the path is, you know what it's supposed to look like. You're supposed to find a husband or a wife and buy the house and the white picket fence. But then beyond that, it's like, okay, so I have all those things, and then they don't know where to turn or what to do. It takes You have to be proactive. You need to be aware of what's available, even if you don't know from a business perspective. It sounds like the other point that I wanted to make and bring up, it sounds like networking has been really important in part of your success. It sounds like you have stumbled, or rather, put yourself in places where you come across the right people that you can have collaborations with to help you grow your business, to help you in different seasonalities, to be able to diverse your income. What have you learned from that, from being proactive and putting yourself in the right rooms with the right people?
Well, masterminds are really a great way to do that. First of all, you've got people who are taking action. They're not wishing and dreaming and hoping and praying. They are actually taking action. They have goals. They're very intentional. And you only grow more being in a room filled with people like that. And we had a mastermind recently where we're working on a lot of things in both my masterminds. In one mastermind, the mentor himself is sitting down and having some goal sessions with us, just to say, hey, where are you at? We've set these goals before. What's going on? And then with my newest mastermind, which is in the capital raising area, I have a separate coach who helps, and we track those. Not only are we tracking what material I'm covering, the meetings I'm going to, but the goals that I am working on. So,
Mm.
so I have two different sources where I am actually tracking goals, and I have to be accountable, and I have to be able to concisely state those goals and discuss my progress. And not only with the two people in these two masterminds, but also with the entire collection, with the Raise Master Mastermind people, my group, my tribe over there, but also with the Millionaire Multifamily Mastermind too. I've got a whole separate tribe over there. And these have several accredited investors. So these are people who are at that higher income. They're very successful. They are very, very focused. It's like being a boat in a marina. When the tide rises, all the boats are rising together. And that's the way I
Mm.
look at it with my mastermind relationships. We're all rising together and we're all sharing tips all the time. If there's some things that I know, like being on podcasts, etc., or having a speaker kit, then I share that with some other people and they share some other tips with me. Just like Sam shared his business model with us. And we had a business meeting and then we had a Zoom call on Wednesday. And it looks like we're going to have a place to wire the money. And I know how the whole model's working, and I know how it works out and the documentation that we sign and we get. So I know all the ins and outs of all of those things. But it's because I'm in two different masterminds that these opportunities really rise up because you are with people who are just willing to put in, honestly, they're willing to put in more work.
Yes.
They're really willing to put in a whole lot of work.
Yes. And I think that makes all the difference. I think a lot of us can have all these wonderful ideas and we can hear about these masterminds and we can sit down in front of the computer and take in the content that's in these masterminds and have the coach and all of the things, but it's action. It all comes down to one thing, and that's action. And one of the things that I have found in my own trajectory has been intentional action, which you mentioned, because action that's erratic and all over the place, right? It's going to get a lot of things going, but is it going to get a lot of things done? And Obviously, when we're trying to accomplish a specific goal, that is important. And also, I find that it's really, really important in my own experience. It has been important for us to not just put ourselves in those rooms, not just take the actions, but that intention piece that really plays a big role in how successful we're able to be. And I also want to point out something that you said is you're in two different masterminds. From an outsider's perspective, as I look at you and your success and we talk about all of the different facets of your businesses and what you do, you have not only diversified your business, you have diversified your mentality. And by being in these different masterminds and having these different types of coaches, you are allowing yourself to see the big picture differently, and therefore what you put out, the actions that you take, allow that diversity to be expansive and be bigger as you meet more people, open up your mind to ideas and business opportunities that you otherwise maybe yourself would have taken years to get to. Anytime I meet somebody who's really successful and who is able to live their lives this way, understanding the bigger picture, because you do have to understand the bigger picture to be able to diversify mentally, emotionally, the way you network. What limiting beliefs did you have to let go of to be able to get to this point?
I had to really get over, and I got over this like when I was very young, because I felt like, oh my God, this is dragging me down. I can't have this belief. And it was a belief that was perpetuated through my nuclear family. And
Mm.
my mother would even say, money doesn't grow on trees. How many
Mm.
times have we heard that from some well-intentioned friends, family, church members, parents? We've heard that. I mean, abundance is really everywhere.
Yeah.
It really is everywhere. And you really do become what you seek. You really do become what you seek. Not only are you looking for it, but on the path you do become it. Like being on podcasts. Here we are. You decided you were going to be a podcaster. I decided I was going to be a podcast guest, and here we are.
Yeah.
I decided, as a course of being in this second mastermind, that I was going to be more intentional in my posting on social media, daily posting. I'm like, oh, I've got to get better at this. Well, guess what? My mentor he went through the whole expense of creating modules just so we could be successful in posting on LinkedIn, very specific to LinkedIn, but we can utilize that in any of the other platforms too. But we just really had to really think about what is intentional, what creates abundance, what is consistent, what is habitual. It's like atomic habits. What are those habits that we really want and we need to utilize that are going to get us to the next place? And even with the podcast, a lot of people are like, oh, why are you doing that? And then all of a sudden, I've got a YouTube channel, you've got a YouTube channel, and we both know and understand that people are going to seek the content on there, not only for their own learning, but podcasters, they're going to want to know what you're talking about and what you
Mm.
have to say that's really, really valuable to their viewers and audiences.
Yeah. And I think there's beauty in that. I have this very deep belief that we are here to help others. And I believe that podcasting and being out there, putting ourselves out there the way that we do in YouTube and social media and with our podcasts, I think that those people that are going to pick up our content, it may be someone who is seeking that change that maybe can't or doesn't know about that mastermind or doesn't have the resources to attend that mastermind, but the knowledge for that, for example, you're sharing with them today could be the one thing that makes the change in their lives that allows them to live a life that they didn't think was otherwise possible. And I think that there's so much more value in a lot of the things that we do. One of the things that I do want to come around and ask you is, we live in a society where we want instant gratification.
Oh, yeah.
We want it now. And I want to ask, because of course we focus here on the controversial, on the path less traveled, and all of those things. What role do you believe that necessity that we are experiencing in society for instant gratification is doing in terms of holding us back from being able to create businesses like yours, which require long term engagement and require long term investments and a lot of action and a lot of work and putting in a lot of extra?
Well, if you can change your mindset, because let's be honest, the reason you want something to happen now is a chemical reaction. You want a dopamine hit. You want that dopamine hit. Now, if you can think about it in your mind and say, "Hey, I don't necessarily need that dopamine hit. I
Mm,
can see the road ahead. I can see the full vision." And then you can delay your gratification. You'll get your gratification. You'll get more than a short term hit on your gratification. You can get extended periods of gratification. But if you switch it over in your mind, have a little mindset change, or you just kind of reflect on that, it's like, do we need just short term, just hit, hit, hit? Or do we want something that's sustained?
yeah.
Ugh. I'd really like things that are more sustained. And so I can get that feeling of abundance and that joy and that peace and the financial freedom and get that over a longer period of time into the future, and also even have some of that that's available to another generation. Is that what I would really want versus just the short term fix? And
Mm,
that's how I kind of work it over and play it up in my mind. And, Dr. Joe Dispenza really talks about some of these things. A lot of times you're wanting these chemical reactions in your body. Your body is really wanting that because your body is the home of feeling and your mind is the home of thought. And so if you can work with your mind and say, hey, wait a second, we can delay this a little bit because there's more that needs to be accomplished.
yeah. I'm a big fan of Joe Dispenza, and I truly believe that once you take control of your mind and you realize that you're the one in charge. It
Right.
is you. It is your actions that change the trajectory of your life. You change not just yourself, you change your environment, and you get to change essentially one thing that you mentioned, which is basically creating things like generational wealth. And there's so much beauty in that because we're not just thinking about ourselves. We're thinking about the people that come after us and how we can make their lives start at a higher jumping pad, right? So like when they leap and when they take the chances, they're chances that are going to take them to heights that maybe we didn't get to because we weren't set up with that generational wealth that we're setting them up for.
Well, one example of that is I worked my way through college because my dad, he had his own construction business, but with the four kids, there was not the money to go around. There
Mhm.
wasn't that to go around. I wanted to do things really differently. And I have a 28-year-old daughter. She's debt free, but my spouse and I paid for her college education. We also had in that family not only my great grandparents who had done that for my grandmother.
Mm.
Yeah, in a time that's very unusual. All daughters, all four
Yeah.
daughters paid for that. But both of Dan's mom and dad, each only children, their parents paid for that. One was a Methodist minister, and one was a single mother.
Mm.
They scraped together the money to make sure that each of their only children had a college education, and look how that kind of worked its way and paid its way forward
Yeah.
to my daughter and her generation. So that's like multiple generations of college education, no debt, more abundance thinking than the next generation.
I wonder as we get ready to wrap up, because you have so much knowledge, you've shared so much, and I feel like we haven't even scraped the surface with everything that you could share with us that could be so helpful to someone. What is one piece of advice that you would have for someone who's thinking about taking a leap of faith basically into creating their own businesses and investing in real estate and maybe single families and or multifamily businesses like you do?
Well, I would say listen to your gut or your intuition, however you want to describe it. So more women are comfortable saying intuition. Sometimes more males are comfortable saying gut. It's really the same thing. But listen to that and also take some intentional action, but
Mm.
get started. Because look at what Dan and I did. We started in the very beginning in 2005. We started with one house. One house. It was a 1957 house. Very, very modest, very, very modest in that beginning. But we took some action. And then we built upon that. Because once you take some action, you do create momentum.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the momentum does propel you forward to take more and more action. And when you reflect on it, when you look back on it, like you and I are really kind of doing today, then a lot of activities happen, a lot of wealth has been generated, a lot of things have been created in that time period. But we had to take the action to create a business and invest in a very modest single family home in the beginning.
And build from there. I love that beautiful piece of advice because I just want to remind our listeners we have to start somewhere. And where we start, it's usually not where we'll end up, but we do have to start. And with that, like I said, you have so much knowledge. I really wish I could sit here and just chat all day because I know I would learn so much about investing that I'm personally super interested in. But I heard there may be some publication where you're going to share some of your knowledge with us, like maybe an ebook. When is that coming out? When can our listeners look out for that? And can you give us a little bit of insight about it so we can all get excited?
Well, it's going to be some steps and how I created all of this. I defined where to start. And that means creating your why. Why do you even want to do it? Why do you want to even move in this direction? And that's going to be like my first chapter talking about that. We are working on the last two chapters. So we're working on the last two chapters of that ebook. We're hoping to be finished before Christmas, but if not, it will be early January. My marketing team, Tim Crouch at the Crouch Group, we've already talked about that, and we're going to have that available on the website. You'll be able to see that. I do blog on my website as well, so that's a great place to pick up some of the blogs. But also that ebook, we're going to make sure we have a little space for that so that we can market the ebook and you can get some access to that because it's going to be a great place to start.
And when that book is published, when your ebook is published, definitely share with us so that we can put it out to all of our listeners and all of our social media so that everyone can grab a copy. I'll be the first to grab a copy because I'm very excited and looking forward to this. And I want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. It's been lovely having you. You're welcome back anytime to share more knowledge.
Before we go, I better give everybody this website.
Yes,
The
yes,
website.
because that's where we're going to find your ebook.
Yeah, how are you going to find it? It's
Yeah.
www and it's Excalibur, Texas, and I'm going to spell that. And that's EXCALIBRE Texas.com. So www.excaliburtexas.com. That's the website. And for your listeners today, if they want to just go ahead and send me a note because they can do that. They can fill out that landing page and let me know that they're anticipating the ebook. So then we start gathering the ebook waiting list. So when it's available, we really make sure we reach out.
Lovely. I love that.
So podcast, I've been able to talk about the ebook some.
Yes, yes. And I added the website right under these as a comment here. So all of our listeners, you can grab that website from there. Make sure you click on it. Make sure you go ahead and fill out the form so that you are able to receive that ebook right when it comes out. And we will also be sharing it when it comes out. Thank you so much for being on. And for all of our listeners, I want to be here to remind you on this beautiful Friday that you are in control of your path. It is yours to walk, it is yours to create. And remember that just because it's not an easy walk, it doesn't mean that it's not one that you should not take. And hope you have a wonderful day.
All right, free spirits, that's all the time we have for today on Flying Upstream.
We hope this episode sparked your curiosity and ignited a desire to explore the extraordinary paths less traveled.
Even when the current feels strong, a whole world of possibilities awaits.
We'll see you next time on the other side of mainstream.
So keep questioning, keep challenging, and most importantly, keep flying upstream.